4 doors, 3 fake versions of Jax. And behind the last one, chained up and half broken, the real him. I think this single scene just rewrote everything we thought we knew about who Jax actually is. Because if these 3 so-called personalities were only masks, what does that say about every cruel thing we watched him do before? Was any of it really him at all? I believe the insane version behind the first door isn't random. I think it's guilt wearing a costume. The moment Pomni mentions help, he snaps. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Jax's mind is punishing him the second anyone offers what he can't accept. Doesn't that mean every time he pushed someone away, he was actually protecting them from himself? And if that's true, how long has he been silently drowning while pretending not to care? I don't think Gengar was chosen for that surreal second scene by accident either. I believe Jax's guilt over her arrival is deeper than we've been shown. And what if that guilt is the actual root of his walls going up in the first place? Could it be that the version of Jax we met at the very start was already a reaction to something we haven't even seen yet? Now let's jump to Ragatha, because I think her thread is about to matter a lot more than anyone expects. I believe that crossed-out door with her image isn't just backstory. I think it's a warning. What if Ragatha is the one person capable of reaching the version of Jax locked behind that final door, and the story simply hasn't let her try yet? Is it possible she's closer to the truth than Pomni ever was? I think the real gut punch is the 4th room, where all 3 fake selves collapse the second someone from outside interferes. That tells me Jax was never able to save himself. I believe he needed someone to break in, and I don't think he even wanted to be found. Not really. So if that's true, what happens the moment he realizes someone finally succeeded? Let's talk about Pomni for a second, because I think her choice inside that chaotic dimension changes her arc completely. She doesn't argue. She doesn't plead. I believe she throws that bottle because some part of her already understood words wouldn't work anymore. What does it say about her own state of mind that violence, not comfort, becomes her breakthrough? I think the mask Jax wears in front of everyone is the real tragedy here, not the eventual outcome. I believe the version of him playing piano alone, chained at the legs, is who he could have been without years of self-hatred stacking up. And I don't think that self-hatred came from nowhere. I think it traces back to one specific night no one's willing to name yet. What is he still hiding about that? Now here's where I think things get darker. I believe Jax's fear of judgment isn't only about his identity. I think it's tangled up with guilt over his mother, guilt he's never once said out loud. What if the reason he keeps everyone at arm's length isn't cruelty at all, but the belief that he doesn't deserve to be close to anyone? Could that belief be the exact thing driving him toward the ending we're all afraid of? I don't think the theory stops there either. I believe Jax's abstraction, if it happens, won't be sudden. I think it'll be the final collapse of years of pretending he was fine. And if Pomni is the only one who ever got close enough to see the real him, doesn't that put everything on her shoulders? What happens if she isn't fast enough this time? So here's my real question, and I don't think anyone's ready for the answer. If all 3 of Jax's masks had to be destroyed just to reach who he truly is, what does that mean is still locked behind the doors we haven't opened yet? The first door didn't just show us Jax's insanity. I think it exposed something the show has been hiding since episode 1. Because right behind that boarded-up entrance, I believe there's a room even Jax himself has never been allowed to enter. What could possibly be so dangerous that his own mind locked it away from its owner? I don't think this abstraction works the way most fans assume. I believe it's not random chaos. I think every single door is built directly from memory and emotion, which means nothing behind them is an accident. So when Jax reacts with pure terror to a door even a key can't open, what does that tell us about what's actually inside? Is it possible that whatever's behind there isn't about anyone else at all? That it's about him? I believe the theory about Pomni hiding behind that door doesn't fully hold up, and here's why. If this space is built purely from Jax's own memories, I don't think it could contain something he was not allowed to witness. I think it can only contain what he already knows and fears most. So if it's not a secret kept from him, what if it's a moment he's simply never let himself face? What could someone bury that deep? I think Kaufmo doesn't fit either. We already saw Jax's reaction to his abstraction, and I don't believe it carries that same unbearable weight. So if it's not Kaufmo, and if it's not some hidden trauma involving Pomni either, I believe there are only 2 people left whose presence could break Jax completely. Do you already know who I'm talking about? I think it's Ribbit. And I believe it's Pomni too. Not one or the other, but both, standing in the same unbearable memory. I think this hallway holds two doors facing each other, one showing Jax's true, unfiltered reaction to losing Ribbit, and the other showing what losing Pomni would actually do to him. If that's true, doesn't that mean Jax has been silently carrying two versions of the exact same nightmare? How is he still functioning at all? Let's shift to the next stage now, because I think this is where the story stops being about the digital circus entirely. I believe the location built around true feelings isn't just about life inside the circus. I think it's a blend of what happened in the real world and what happened after. And if that's true, doesn't that mean whatever's hidden there isn't just backstory? I think it's the actual root of everything we've watched unfold. I believe the leading theory here is correct, at least partly. I think Jax's biggest secret really is behind that door, the truth about who he is. But I don't think that's the whole picture. I believe this room also holds his unresolved guilt about his mother, guilt he's never once said out loud to anyone in the circus. What if the reason he keeps deflecting every emotional conversation isn't pride at all, but the fear that speaking it out loud will make it permanent? I think there's something else buried in that same room, something I haven't heard many people talking about. I believe Jax has imagined alternate versions of his own life, timelines where he actually tells Ribbit the truth, where he lets Pomni in sooner, where none of this ends the way it did. And if he's replayed those outcomes over and over in his head, doesn't that mean some part of him always knew silence would destroy him? Why didn't he choose differently when he had the chance? Now here's where I want to bring in something the show barely touches on directly. I believe Gengar's memory returning at the start of episode 9 isn't just a plot device. I think it's the key that unlocks everything happening later. Because once we understand that these aren't just copies but actual transferred consciousness, doesn't every single backstory suddenly carry twice the weight? I think this single reveal changes how we're supposed to feel about literally everyone in this circus. Let's talk about Pomni's real life for a second, because I believe her story is far more intentional than it looks. I think Abigail Brooks was someone quietly disappearing into herself long before any of this began, and I believe her interest in abandoned places wasn't a hobby at all. I think it was a metaphor the show planted early and never explained outright. Doesn't that make her transformation after entering the circus even more significant? What does it mean that opening up only happened once she stopped being fully human? Now, Jax's real story is where I think the entire emotional core of this season lives. I believe Leroy's relationship with his parents wasn't just difficult. I think it was the exact blueprint for every wall he later built inside the circus. I don't think his mother ever saw him clearly, and I believe that failure shaped every defensive, dismissive thing Jax has ever said. So when he ran, do you think he ever really stopped running, even after entering a completely different world? I believe the months Leroy spent wandering before finding stability say more than the show lets on directly. I think that silence, that unknown stretch of surviving alone, is exactly where his fear of judgment was born. And if I'm right, I don't think that fear ever left him. I think it followed him straight into his digital copy, shaping every guarded, mocking version of Jax we've seen from day one. Isn't it strange that the thing keeping him distant from everyone was never really about them at all? Let's jump to Ragatha now, because I believe her real identity reframes everything we thought about her strange, people-pleasing tendencies. I think Susie's desperate need to satisfy an impossible parent explains so much of what looked like odd behavior in earlier episodes. And I believe her transformation after entering the digital world wasn't really about the circus at all. I think it was about finally being free of a version of herself she never chose. Doesn't that make her connection to Jax's guilt even more devastating? I think Zubil's story deserves more attention than it's gotten. I believe Riley's struggle with body image directly explains one of the most unsettling fear sequences we've seen, and I don't think that was a coincidence at all. I believe her real-world success, opening a space where everyone feels safe being themselves, is the show quietly telling us that healing doesn't erase pain. It just gives it somewhere better to go. What does it say that her healing may have indirectly helped Jax hold on longer than he should have? Gengar's story, I believe, is the most quietly tragic reveal in this entire episode. I think Zoe's mental health struggles and that traumatic accident explain far more about her behavior than fans initially assumed, and I don't think her connection to Jax was ever really about resentment. I believe it was about two people who recognized pain in each other without ever saying it directly. Isn't it possible that Gengar understood Jax better than anyone, simply because she'd survived something just as heavy, Now let's talk about Kinger, because I think his story is the calm before something much bigger. I believe Grant's stability, his successful life, his role at the company that started all of this, makes him the one person capable of actually solving the abstraction problem. And if that's true, doesn't that mean the fate of every abstracted character depends entirely on whether Kinger chooses to search for answers? What happens if he decides it's safer not to look? I don't think Kane's return should be viewed as simply a happy ending either. I believe there's a version of this story where Kane never comes back at all, and I think that version ends in complete devastation for every single character left behind. If contact with an abstracted being spreads the same corruption, doesn't that mean losing Jax could have triggered a chain reaction none of them could survive? I believe the darkest possible outcome isn't abstraction spreading. I think it's Kane returning already consumed by everything Abel represented. If that anger had won, I don't think healing Pomni would have meant mercy at all. I believe it would have meant something far more calculated. What kind of digital circus would this become if kindness was only ever a performance? So here's where I want to leave this part of the theory, because I think the real question isn't what already happened. I believe the real mystery is what's still locked behind the doors none of us have seen opened yet. And if Jax's true self only appeared once every mask was destroyed, what do you think is waiting behind the very last one? I believe there's a detail almost nobody's talking about, and it changes how we should read Jax's entire ending. That obsessive thought about Ribbit laughing at him wasn't just fear. I think it was a lie Jax told himself so convincingly that it destroyed two of the people closest to him. If that's true, doesn't that mean the tragedy was never really about Ribbit at all? What if it was always about Jax believing he was unlovable before anyone ever confirmed it? I don't think Pomni's decision to stay inside that broken dimension should be read as bravery alone. I believe it was the first time in the entire series she stopped thinking about her own survival completely. And if she truly saw herself in danger and chose Jax anyway, doesn't that tell us she already understood something the rest of us are only realizing now? What does it mean that saving him mattered more to her than living? I believe the moment Jax accused Pomni of the exact thing he feared from Ribbit is the most important line in the entire episode. I don't think that accusation was really aimed at her. I think it was Jax speaking to the version of himself that never got closure. And if Pomni never once considered judging him, doesn't that prove the fear controlling Jax his entire life was never rooted in reality? Was he fighting a ghost that never truly existed? Let's talk about the tears in that final moment, because I don't think they were relief. I believe they were the sound of someone finally admitting every mistake at once, with no time left to fix any of them. And if his mental state had already broken past the point Kane could repair, doesn't that mean this ending was locked in long before Pomni ever reached him? Could anyone have stopped this? Or was it already too late the second he walked away that first time? Now here's something I think deserves way more attention. I believe the theory that Jax could have survived isn't just wishful thinking. I think the show gave us direct proof. If Pomni had simply followed him instead of letting him walk away, I believe the entire ending shifts completely. Doesn't that make this the most heartbreaking kind of tragedy? The kind that could have been avoided by one single choice? I don't think Kane's return should be separated from Jax's fate either. I believe if Jax had survived, Kane's admission of guilt and the reveal of everyone's real identities would have happened much earlier, giving the story room to go somewhere completely different. And if that's true, I believe the show intentionally sacrificed Jax to slow down and deepen everything else. Was his loss the price the story paid to make Kane's redemption feel real? I believe the theory about bringing back every abstracted character is far more possible than people assume. I think Gengar and Kane working together could eventually crack the code behind abstraction itself. And if Ribbit, Kaufmo, and Jax all returned in some rewritten ending, doesn't that mean the story we got wasn't the only path available? What would it take for the creators to actually choose that version? Now let's talk about identity, because I don't think Gooseworld's recent statement was accidental at all. I believe confirming Jax's gender wasn't just fan service. I think it recontextualizes every insecure, defensive moment we've watched since episode 1. And if Jax's fear of judgment was tied to this exact secret the entire time, doesn't that mean every joke, every wall, every act of cruelty was really self-protection in disguise? How differently would you view Jax's actions knowing this from the very beginning? I believe Ribbit and Kaufmo's real identities matter more than a fun trivia reveal. I think the fact that Leah's name echoes Leroy's isn't a coincidence. I believe the creators are quietly tying these characters together long before the circus ever existed. And if all these people knew each other in the same city, boarding the same bus toward the same fate, Doesn't that mean their friendship was written into existence before any of them even signed up for this experiment? Is it possible none of this was ever really random? I don't think Pomni's hobby channel appearing in episode 9 is just a background detail either. I believe the creators are planting something intentional here, something that hasn't paid off yet. And if there's truly an unreleased video sitting on that channel, doesn't that raise the question of what exactly she filmed before entering the circus? What could be hiding in that one unavailable clip?